Very welcome, everyone. Today we're going to have this interesting seminar about the concept of sufficiency. And this project is organized by the Green Foundation, the Green European Foundation, with the support of Cogito and with the financial support of the European Parliament to the Green European Foundation. And we're going to first listen to something like a 15-minute presentation by Dirk. Can you remind me of your... Holemans, Dirk Holemans, who have written a book, which we should have here, but it's called Enough. Dirk has been writing it, and he's working for a Belgian think tank, and also has been a member of parliament. And then we will have a discussion with Åsa Callmer, who is a researcher with an interest in and expertise in the concept of sufficiency, and Rebecka, who is a green politician in Sweden, also with a big interest in this concept. We will have a discussion here, the four of us, and then we will also let the audience in. So you can raise your hands later on. I will tell you when you can do so. But first of all, I think we'll start with a presentation by Dirk. So please welcome up. One thing more. My name is Mikael Malmaeus. I'm replacing Isadora Vronsky, who couldn't be here tonight. So if you thought I was Isadora, that was not me.
Okay. Great to be here. It's a privilege, a joy, and a pleasure. With or without echo. You don't hear me? Okay. So it's a pleasure to be here. Talking, actually, in a way, you took a big risk listening to someone you don't know about the concept sufficiency, which is also for some people a bit strange. So, very happy to be here. As an introduction, I want to tell two things out of the book. There are, of course, much more things we elaborate on, but the first is the importance of imagination. So while we are thinking about the book and what to write, I've written many books, mostly boring non-fiction, you would say, and then, of course, how can we reach out to people, move their hearts? And 3 years ago, we had the pleasure with our organization to invite Amitav Ghosh, who is a writer, novelist, from India, living already many years in New York. You probably will hear about him later. I think he will soon get a Nobel Prize. And he wrote a lot of novels, but he also wrote 2 books about the climate problem issue. And one of his books is about analyzing all the novels we are reading, written in Europe. And he says it's very strange. It's always about persons coming out of age or a love story. And nature is just this kind of decor surrounding. It's not part of the story. It's not part of what's happening. It's not changing. What he said, in other cultures, nature can be an actor. Nature can change things. And he said it's something very typical of the modern worldview. And it has severe impact how you imagine the world, because how you imagine the world implies how you design and make the world. And he gave 2 small examples, which I want to also talk to you. The first, he said, when he was a student, he was in India living, one day walking from the campus to his student home, and there was a huge storm, a hurricane, bicycles flying in the air, and he had to really save his life. And then he said, I never had the courage to use this real experience in my novels, because my readers would say, oh, stupid, it's not possible, bad story. And you see fiction and non-fiction in our world, sometimes they now are changing places. If you would say, there's a huge fire in Los Angeles and they're not able to stop it, you would say, come on, don't exaggerate. But there's another example Amitav Ghosh gave, which is very powerful. He said until 17th century, all cultures, also European culture, had the idea you cannot control nature. The sea, for instance, is a very powerful actor. So you shouldn't build cities near the sea because then the sea can swallow the city. And then, of course, 17th century, capitalism, British Empire, how to extract most value out of the world. You need ships and you need harbors close to the sea. And then they built New York, they built Bangkok. All these cities are now threatened by a rising sea level due of climate disruption. So how we imagine our world will influence how we design and make our world. So that's, and I'm not going to tell it, but I just want to, I will not read it, but so therefore we start the book with a small short story fiction. It's about people who show how we in 10 years' time can make a better society. And we did it on purpose in 10 years. Because you all know these studies, we will go net zero by 2050. Everybody agrees, Shell, Coca-Cola, whatever, of course, but 2050. Of all the politicians or CEOs in the room, they're retired or dead. So it's the coming 10 years. And also to make it more concrete, we finished the book, and at the end of this evening, I will read a little piece, how within 10 years, people, we take the example of a young couple, can lead a very good, flourishing life within planetary boundaries. So I think this is something we should really embrace. It is possible within 10 years to build another economy. That was my first point. My second point is, of course, the title. We first wrote the book in Dutch, and there it was interesting because we wanted a specific word, and so you have growth and degrowth, but we wanted something else. And so we invented a word in Dutch. It's very funny because today I learned you can also invent it in Swedish. So people can help me, people I already spoke to today. So what is growth in Swedish? And so it's groei in Dutch, and we invented the word omgroei. Omväxt, you invented a new word in Swedish. There you go. That's the future. Okay, and then, of course, we had to translate it, and we were not able to invent it in English, so we said, what's the core idea? And the core idea is sufficiency, but that's a more academic concept, so we said, how would you explain it to your neighbor? And then enough. Everybody should have enough. And when there's overconsumption, you say, it's enough, stop. So I think it's something everybody understands enough. And it's also nice, whether it's in Dutch or in English or in Swedish, there's the same core, it's the same word. How it's in Swedish? Genoeg? What is very interesting is in my language, Dutch, you have the word genoeg, enough, but it refers to an old saying, when people have eaten, they say, I have enough, but it's a positive, satisfying way of expression. Thank you, I have enough. And we also have the saying, it was een genoegen, it was a pleasure. I'm really thankful. And so this is kind of, I think, meaning we should incorporate again. We have enough. Wow, thank you, it's nice. And so we have to build an economy that is based on enough, which means we have to put basic needs first again. Not all the preferences that advertisements are telling us day and night what you need, and then you have to go and buy them, and you are 10 seconds happy, and then you are 2 days very unhappy, because you go to the shop in the high street, and there's this new type of smartphone. I said, I really want it. Wait, really will make me happy. You buy it, you go outside, and there's an advertisement. Within 2 weeks, there's a new model. Oh my God, I'm old-fashioned. So this rat race, we have to stop it. And so an economy of enough starts from the premise of what are basic needs, and the basic needs of everyone. Therefore, we have to design provisioning systems. We have to provision what is necessary to have basic needs on the one hand, and of course also tackle overconsumption, because these two are coming together. And so, for instance, if we look at the system of mobility, we don't have to provide everybody with a car. We have to provide mobility, how to be mobile, to get where you want, see your friends. And so how to provide enough mobility within planetary boundaries. That's the way how I got here from Belgium. Good public transport. And of course also motivating people to self-organize, share cars, share bikes. And this is of course a totally different story than the transition of the mobility system will be changing all cars on diesel to cars, electric cars. Then we forget that how are we then solving traffic jams? We are not. Do electric cars have wheels? You have tires. What are they made of? Rubber. Where does it come from? No. Trees. Plantations. We are still cutting forests in Cameroon, countries like Cameroon, to produce our tires. How many tires a year we produce? You can't even imagine. Do we recycle tires? No, we don't. So just one example of this totally crazy system. And so what I told about mobility, we should do the same for housing, for energy. And so the crucial thing is that we tackle the question, how much do we need to satisfy our basic needs, not our wants? That's really, because I don't know whether it's here the same, but in Belgium, we have a crazy system. If you are very rich, you can have 5 swimming pools in your garden. And if you pay for it, you can fill them all 5 with drinking water, and you can heat them in winter. So in theory, there's this principle, the polluter pays. In reality, our economy is the payer pollutes. And so there are no limits. So this is something we really have to change. First, look at basic needs. Everybody needs drinking water. We cannot afford to have everyone have this big private swimming pool in his garden. And so I think that's the way to move forward. And I didn't take, how many minutes I'm already talking? 10. Oh, I have enough time to continue. Great. And so I think the concept of provisioning systems is a very good lens to look at the economy. And again, provision, it's a fantastic word. It comes from Latin, provision. You look in the future, but you provide also something. So, for instance, I want to go hiking in the mountains tomorrow. I think, okay, then I will need a backpack with some food and a raincoat, and I already put these things in my backpack. So provisioning is looking what do we need as society, and how are we going to organize that, and how to organize that. Therefore, in the book, we work on the concept of universal basic services. I think this is key. And it entails 2 different things that are complementary. It's public services. It's the responsibility of the government to take care of its citizens. So we need public health care. We need public transport. But if you only follow that line of reasoning, you end up being a socialist. And I'm an ecologist. So next to these public services, we have to embrace and stimulate the self-organization of citizens, whether it's in mobility, sharing cars. On food, it's about collective gardening, working together, citizens and farmers. And for this, we have to also have other mindset. So there's a lot of things going on for decades about public-private partnership, but we should invest in public-civil partnerships. Governments working together and supporting citizens. Then you get another economy. To give a very concrete example, in a lot of countries, also in Belgium, we have a lot of citizens coming together, being not satisfied with the energy system, running on fossil fuels, and so they set up their own energy cooperatives, saying we will collect money from citizens, build our own windmills, solar panels, so we are not dependent on the market price. And this, I think, is crucial. Certain things we should get out of the speculative market. And so, for instance, in 2022, there was the crisis with the war, and the energy price went up a lot. And so energy price is one price for all European markets. And so people in Belgium that had to buy electricity from a private provider, they had to pay 500 euros extra. I, as member of the cooperative, I didn't have to do that because the price of my electricity comes not from the market. We have our own windmills and solar panels. So it's also a form of freedom and of security. Questions are a bit later, but we have time for questions, no problem. And with this I want to end. It's one chapter of the book. We need other economic institutions. We need commons, we need cooperatives to take economy back in our hands. That maybe can make a small profit because they have to, of course, stay alive, but they have a societal goal. And it's the societal goal that is first and all for these enterprises. Cooperatives are one example. We should take basic parts of our economy, like food, like energy. We should decommodify it partly and take it in our own hands. So we provide more security because we control it, but it's also more freedom because if you then pay a price, whether it's for your electricity or for your housing, which is lower than the market price, maybe you can go working a bit less and choose what you want to do with this liberated time. And so that's maybe already a nice question, thought for you to think. What would you do with liberated time? Thank you.
I think you can stay here, and I will also welcome up, thank you very much, by the way, for the very interesting. Welcome Åsa Callmer here, and Rebecka and Moine. And I will start now to give the word to Åsa. You're a researcher, as I said already, and so we're here to talk about sufficiency, and that's sort of your research, I know. So what's your... Can you tell us a little bit more about the concept and what do you think about the concept from your perspective?
Absolutely. I started studying sufficiency about 10 years ago, and I did so because I found it to be a concept that combined two and seemed to be an interesting solution, so to speak, to crises, really. The ecological crisis and the social crisis, or you could say the crisis of injustice, globally and all over in our society, in Sweden and Europe. And sufficiency, to say very briefly how to define it. It was defined by the IPCC in the 6th Assessment Report in 2022 as a way to provide well-being for all within the planetary boundaries. So it's very much having to do with limits. How do we the ecological limits that we have to respect. We have to respect the ecological limits, but we don't today, right? Our economy is growing as if there were no limits. So how do we make the ecological limits? How do we make societies that mirror the ecological limits? Those planetary boundaries needs to be reflected in limitations on human activities, really. And it's about enough. It's about what can be enough, and it's about how everyone can live well or have the opportunity to live well and to secure their basic needs within the planetary boundaries. And I think it was really interesting what you said about this positive connotations of the Dutch word. Was it genoeg? Genoeg. I think that's really interesting because in my thesis I write about sense of sufficiency. Like there is an urgent need for affluent individuals and groups and societies to develop a sense of sufficiency. And what can that be? A sense of what is enough. It's enough that the way we treat the ecosystems, the way we treat the natural world, the way we treat other human beings that are being exploited in the name of the affluent consumer societies. And this enough, it's very much when you talk about, if you talk about sufficiency or the Swedish word lagom, for example, you can say, well, it's enough, and then you often land in discussing, yeah, okay, I can settle with this. I don't need that fancy car. It's good enough to have another car, or and I wanted to me that is not a very positive connotation to kind of settle with good enough. So I would say that this sense of sufficiency is very much about encountering what is good and enough, and because it needs to be a transformation of society that is based on the planetary boundaries, the ones that we need to keep within, but it needs to be a transformation that is good for all, for everybody. And so I think there is a risk, if we talk about sufficiency, that people who don't understand the concept or who doubt it or want to claim that growth is the only way forward, there is always the risk that sufficiency can be interpreted as taking us backwards, which I think is it's a misconception, and therefore I think it's important to keep this good and enough. So that's where we need to that's what we need to reach towards, or to aim towards. I think, should I say something more about, or we'll discuss more my research later, perhaps, the politics, or
yeah. I think if you if you're fine, we're coming back to that. And about politics, I think we have the right person, Rebecka Moine here. If you would like to reflect on sufficiency in relation to politics, how can we? Is it possible to, or I mean, how is the situation when you try to talk about sufficiency in a political context?
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dirk, and for the organizers for creating this event and meetings. I believe in meetings and conversations. And this is a topic which is a little bit of, I don't know what you guys think, but I would say taboo in Swedish politics. If you mention any criticism about capitalism, you're a communist. And if you mention any criticism about this economic growth, then you want to take us back into the caves and live in the history. So, and as a politician working with this, sometimes maybe you can be considered as naive, and the debate is not really ready, I would say, unfortunately. But I really believe in conversations and meetings such as these. And I think that all of us here tonight have a responsibility to kind of share this knowledge and conversation and make them more mainstream. Because if we can make it more mainstream, it will be more powerful when we mention any kind of criticism against the current system, which is broken. And the more times people hear this message from more and more people, different people with different arguments, it will be faster and easier to see anything as a change. Because the change, we talk about these goals, 2050 and da-da-da, it's not happening, it's all fake. And it's goals we agree on, it's not what it's about. How do we reach these goals? It's maybe I sound a little bit skeptical, yes I am, but it's so much about greenwashing right now. We are pushing so much responsibility into the global south and into the future, and other people will take responsibility and do something. And from a political point of view, working in the parliament, I'm very frustrated about so much communication is going to the individual instead of upwards. Because it's the people in power, it's not so many people actually, who are responsible for the most of the share of emissions, but also the transformation from biodiversity into monocultures and such. So yeah, let's imagine something else. Let's maybe imagine the smell of a forest, and I don't mean any monoculture, I mean a real forest. And the sounds of the birds and the silence in between. And the feeling you get, probably, it's something that makes you calm and happy and satisfied in a way. Think about a shopping mall. Wow, so many possibilities there, right? But I don't mean we have to choose between, like in this black and white way, but what we're doing is we're feeding our world with shopping malls and consummation. It's consuming the nature. So let's imagine that these forests are actually there. And the seas, the oceans are full of life, not plastic. And let's imagine that the forest is taking life and time back. I think people are longing for visions again. Like visions that doesn't only have to do, how do we limit bad things from happening? But how do we create a magic place again where life can thrive and people can meet, and we will have more power closer to ourselves, not the big companies. And now it's springtime, and it's a beautiful time to hear all the birds coming back from other parts and maybe learn their different sounds. And I just encourage you, if you're not all bird watchers here, to just start to learn some few, maybe just a few different sounds from the birds. And when you walk outside, you will notice that it's not like outside is outside. Outside and nature is integrated with us. And these are beings. Wow, many of them have traveled from Africa back to Sweden, to your garden maybe. And if we do and think more like this, that the surrounding, which you mentioned, Dirk, in the books and in visions and in stories, is not just surrounding, it's life. And me, speaking also as a mother, I think life is magical. It's joyful. It's hopeful even. And I don't really want us to stop only with the human beings, but all the other beings can actually make our lives more happy, I would say, and more rich in a way that doesn't just count the money or monetary values. So now in springtime, start to learn your fellow species just a little bit, just maybe 3 or 4 or 5. And that may give some extra happiness and extra thoughts about what is important, what makes us happy. So I want to end this by saying that the visions that we're aiming at could be make life richer, make place and give time back to nature. And it will also be something that makes us more happy, because we are longing not to just limit the disasters, but to give something back. I think many people want to be part of something positive again. And what do we have to sacrifice? What do we have to sacrifice? Maybe not exploiting as many parts, maybe not overconsumption in the rate and the pace that we're doing, maybe not organizing economy like it's a pile of waste that comes out of it. So I think that we can try to have both these thoughts, that what we are doing with the economy doesn't really make us happy, but it takes away the possibilities of life. On the other hand, life is richness, and biodiversity richness can make us more happy, and being part of a society which gives something back to ourselves, to other fellow species, and to the future generation, that could be something to actually long for. And I think it's time for those visions, and I think it's really crucial, and it's about time to have these discussions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebecka and Åsa, for your reflections. I think, we're coming back to visions. I think we will have to keep all the visions in mind, but I also guess that we're also a little bit interested in about the concepts and how do we go to work. So I would like to start with some more, I don't know, technical, but sort of definitions and things is good to know. So, for example, how much is enough when we're trying to envision or define the space that we're going to try to live in? How can we measure it or define it? I guess we have both a level that our needs have to be fulfilled in some way, but what are the needs? How much do we need? I don't know if you want to come back, Dirk, to the microphone to start with.
You never have friends enough.
No.
So I think, and this is typically for this kind of debate, the tricky thing is go into the false debate on what's your individual responsibility. And then with the finger, how much is enough is a debate we have to do as a country, as a city, in a democratic way. We already did it on emissions of carbon, but we also should do it on resources. And then is the basic question, how do we restructure our society? How do we build systems that allow to have good lives using much less energy and resources? And for instance, to give one example of the city where I live, Ghent. Somebody already has been to Ghent in Belgium. Was okay? Great, old city. Oh, come and visit Ghent next time. But the interesting thing is what I'm going to say about Ghent is also happening in Paris, which is a huge city, so it's big change. 20 years ago, my city was a city dominated by cars. So you had a mobility system which was using a lot of resources. Then there was a change of government. The red-green coalition gained majority. There was introduced a lot of things. We made parking much more expensive, but also investing in good pavement for pedestrians, a very ambitious cycle policy plan, and then also change of rules where how to drive with your car. And so in less than 10 years, because the mobility plan was introduced in 2017, we had a radical change in mobility. We have now the most frequent way of going somewhere in Ghent is now by bike. And people walk and people take public transport, but still, if you want to go somewhere by car, it's possible, but not just driving through the city. And so the critique before was, yeah, nobody will come to Ghent anymore. We'll become a desert. I remember slogans from the right-wing parties, you're making a desert out of Ghent. Nobody will come. And so by joke, every Saturday we put pictures on social media, pedestrian streets with too many people, you cannot pass almost. So it's really inaccessible. And also to make it very, I have 2 daughters, working, living in Ghent. They don't have a car, they don't want a car. What should I do with a car? And so, how much is enough? We were able, and we still have to do more, but we have been able to change the mobility system using much less energy and resources. Well, I think we have even more mobility. And so I think systemic questions you have to answer at a systemic level. You have to provide ways that people can live a flourishing life using as little as possible from nature in the end. And the same goes for housing, the same goes for energy. So maybe we come back to that later, but so we should discuss the concept of freedom. Is freedom sitting in your chair and thinking, what shall I do tomorrow? Not being aware that the surrounding environment stimulates you to do certain things, allows you to do certain things, or makes it impossible. Maybe the debate on freedom is, how do we take control back of our life world? So the life world enables us to live a good life.
So do you agree? And do you think that sufficiency should be defined on more on a systemic level than on an individual level? Or do you think, how do you think, what would you say about that?
I think it can be defined at all levels. But I think this is a really interesting thing, because in today's society, we have freedom as consumers. We don't really have freedom as citizens or as active members of the society in the sense that you mentioned. But I think the question of how much is enough, it can definitely, I agree that it shouldn't be answered at the individual level. I mean, we know that the earth cannot take what we consume now. I mean, we have kind of passed enough. In Sweden, we need 4 planet Earths if everyone consumed as we do. So I think the question of how much is enough, I mean, we have boundaries that we must keep within. We must kind of think about those. And then, of course, I think what is enough, as you said, needs to be talked about, discussed. If we are to keep within these boundaries, okay, so how do we set the limits for our consumption? Which consumption is possible within those limits? And I think that most people would agree that, for example, banning private jets is quite a simple issue. There is nothing necessary with a private jet. There is nothing necessary with having 3 homes or more. You can set kind of those. You can set limits to excess consumption quite easily, I think, by public deliberations, but that needs to be discussed in a democratic way. And then, of course, when it comes down to, okay, so what can we as a city, what space for consumption do we have here in the city? How big is our carbon budget, or how big? What do we need to do to decrease our ecological footprint? It will. I mean, of course, there needs to be a lot of mathematics in this, which I'm not the expert in, but I think the donut economy is a good place to start. For example, setting the boundaries. Yes, setting the outer limit to the planetary boundaries, and the inner limit of the donut, the kind of social foundation that we need to, with all the basic needs that we need to fulfill for all humans. And then, of course, we need to think of all the non-human beings. And I think how much is enough is a difficult question. Yeah. But I would like to add also that I think sufficiency is also a question of responsibility, very much, that falls on the affluent individuals, but parts of the world, groups and societies. The bigger responsibilities on us to kind of step back, to deoccupy the too large space that our lifestyles demand today. So that's one way of putting it. Mm-hmm.
Rebecka, do you, as a politician or as thinking about the politics here, I mean, the bottom up of the top down approaches, it seems like the politics is addressing both, but we cannot get support for perhaps the policies, the top down policies from the voters who come from below. Or I guess you must have thought about this, but yeah. I think this is specifically tricky when we're, at least if we're seeing sufficiency as some kind of limitations. I mean, you try to convince us that sufficiency is something that we all would want to, and I hope it can be so, but still working in politics, it must be a bit difficult.
Yes. I don't. Yeah, I think many people, if I raise this question in the parliament or so, people will think about hard times, war times, ransoms, and things like which are. You think something bad will happen, or it's something you will ask for the public or the people, which will be kind of painful to do, to put on a proposal with sufficiency, for example. It's not a very positive reform, or how you can rephrase it into something more popular. And I liked what you said about freedom. About freedom for whom exactly? Because the system that we have now, it's a lot of consumer freedom, but for humans, as humans, we're not consumers all the time, and especially the people who are very much aware, maybe take a step back and don't consume so much. The society and the economy is not built for those people. And also, like, our food systems are taking resources, a lot of resources, putting in huge pressure on other countries and on other species and animals, of course. It's not freedom for the animals, for example. It's not even freedom for the people living in fields which are a lot of poison in them and directly affected about this. So freedom for whom? It's very narrowed down to the consumer in a very rich context, I would say. Not for those who produce it, not for the people who will come after us, not for the cows or the pigs or the hen or whatever. So it's a very narrow definition, or maybe not even defined, just doing this business as usual in a very, very big scale. And well, this is something that we really should address. Morally, I think it's important, but also these planetary boundaries and the donut economy, these principles, I'm a huge fan of them, but what does it really mean? Because now, today, well, we can agree, maybe on a level higher up even, about the principles of donut economy and planetary boundary, but what does it mean? Because we do have a government in Sweden who says those things are so nice, and they don't see that this is exactly what we need to do something about in Sweden, because they are claiming these myths about Sweden have decoupled, and Sweden is a forerunner in these topics. So what does it really mean? And even for a municipality or a local level, well, there is an exploitation plan here, and this forest is being threatened. What should we do? Well, it's just this forest, it's just the local forest, it's not like a rainforest, no. So it can't be that important. But we don't know where the boundaries are actually exceeded or not. It may be that typical forest, but we don't know. So this is kind of abstract when we say donut economy and planetary boundaries, and even the carbon budget, which is very concrete in some way, and the ecological footprints, but they are all voluntarily. It's like something we can think about. It's a nice principle, but I think for something to happen, it needs to be forbidden to exceed these kind of limits, and they need to be defined somehow, and it's not easy, but it's what needs to be done, actually. And we have a long way to go, I can say. But I think I have to be positive and hopeful that people are also demanding this or seeing through this system, because it's so much, how do you say, fluffy words and so little action. So I think that if the party leaders, for example, would speak out and say these kind of things, people would also, I hope, applaud them and say, yes, that's the way to go. It's not easy. It's not going to be popular at Wallenbergarna or other mighty people, the elite. But we need to do this change, and we know it somehow, deep down our hearts, that this is what we need to do. So big support. I hope that would be the response. I want you to nod now, because otherwise, if people are not nodding or encouraging this, it will be political, how do you say, självmord? Suicide. Yeah. So, yeah, please don't leave me hanging, and please, let's do this together. Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's, thank you. It's a long way to go, you say, but you say we can do it in 10 years. So I'm wondering, so I want to go into some more details about policy instruments. I mean, I think you have written about working hour reductions and universal basic services, and I mean, sort of nitty-gritty political propositions and instruments.
You say nitty-gritty?
I said so, but maybe I'm not using the right word, but what would you say?
So we have different proposals in different chapters. I will try to combine a few. So I hope your imagination muscle is quite active now. So only maybe a few years ago, if you bought something, you only had a guarantee of 6 months. Then, at a certain moment, the European Parliament decided we have a guarantee of 2 years, which is now, which means that, for instance, I have here something I use when I go running, and this watch is rather new because The one before, after 2 years and 1 month, it broke. I went to the shop and I said, what to do? And they said, we don't repair old models. So what we need as a first step, and it's already, there's a lot of debate going on, and have made decisions already in the European Parliament, but to put it bold, imagine we decide as a political community that all stuff you buy, you have a guarantee of 5 years and a guarantee of repairing of 30 years. By the way, this sounds really ambitious. The first washing machine of my mother lasted 40 years. So what's radical? Anyway, imagine all the things you buy for 5 years, you have full guarantee, and they all have a repair guarantee in 30 years. Then we only need half of the energy and resources for all the stuff we buy. Okay, hold your horses, you will say. Then we will have to produce less, and so there will be maybe jobs lost. That's not a problem. We will be working less because we will produce less. So maybe what would be a radical reduction in time? How much was the average working week now in Sweden? 40. What's radical to go down? 20. 35. 10. Interesting. So 20 is very interesting because there's an English-based think tank, the New Economics Foundation, who calculated how many time you need as a couple to have a decent life combining job, family, household. And they came up with 21 hours working time. And then you have a decent life. Great. So imagine all the stuff we buy lasts much longer. We only work 21 hours. Then you will say, small problem. We will earn less money. There, of course, if we have to buy less, we need less money. So that's already part of the solution. If then also, as society and government, we provide accessible and affordable universal basic services, we are making a kind of what I call a spinning wheel, where changes reinforce and accelerate each other. And that's how we can do a lot in 10 years. For give another example, and these are all propositions which are very feasible. It's not science fiction. The OECD has been working last years on a fair tax for corporations worldwide, at least 15% on the things they do in each country. If we would implement this, we would have a lot of more fiscal income, and so a lot of more money to fuel the transition. So there are already a lot of measures or proposals, and if we combine them, I think this change can be done in 10 years. And maybe just to answer also this working time reduction, 40 to 20, it's very nice, but it's normal. The grandparents of my grandparents, they worked 70 hours, and they went on strike to go from 70 to 40. So 40 to 21, it's just logic.
Can you? I have just a follow-up question on the difference between efficiency and sufficiency, and when it comes to policies. Do you understand my question? I don't know if you understand it. So either you explain my question.
I will explain your question. I'm from basic training and engineer, so I understand efficiency. So efficiency is doing more with the same input. For instance, for decades, engineers have invested time and knowledge in making your car using less diesel. When I was a kid, the car of my parents, they used 12 liters. And when it drove faster than 120 hours, it made a lot of noise. Now there are cars using only 5 liters of diesel. And you can drive much faster. That's efficiency. You also can now, a freezer uses needs much less energy than an old one. But taking the example of cars, two things happened. The first thing is cars nowadays are bigger, heavier, having a lot of options like air conditioning, and so the overconsumption of your car is much less than the efficiency made at the level of the engine. Second, of course, there are much more cars. We're all driving more kilometers, so the overall impact is zero. That's what economists call the rebound effect. So if you make something more efficient, in a way it's cheaper, then we will make more use of it. If a company can produce cars, they will not say we will keep the level of energy use and produce less cars. No, they will make more cars. And so this is efficiency. We need efficiency, we need efficient cars, we need efficient freezers, but it only makes sense when we add sufficiency. How much cars do we need as society? How much freezers do we need? And so you need both. You need technological innovation to have the most efficient apparatus, cars, printers, whatever. But how much do we need? In an office, does everybody need a printer? Or maybe we share one, big, efficient. So always the two together.
Yeah, so I guess you can agree that most policies today, not the ones you suggested, but the ones more commonly, environmental policies, they are engaged in efficiency more. I mean, you promote, even like recycling is using the more efficient use of materials, but it's just an extra source of material unless you put some limits on the extraction, I think, or I know. So I mean, I think
no, it's
this
true.
is
it's
why
true.
we need
and why is there so much focus on efficiency? Because you don't have to question our capitalist society. You just say, you know what? You can keep on buying every 4 years a new car because it will be more efficient. No, you have to buy a new car because your old one is using too much diesel. But how much energy was and resources were needed to produce this car, and where does this car goes to? Actually, it first goes to Poland 5 years, and then it goes 20 years to Africa, to answer the question. And so efficiency without sufficiency is bullshit.
Yeah, that's why I try to talk about policies for sufficiency. So, Åsa, do you have some reflections on that?
Yeah, I think when I've worked on developing kind of a framework for politics for sufficiency, I think you touched on all the important elements in such a politics, and I think and you said limitations. There needs to be limitations. Again, that reflect the actual boundaries that we need to respect. And so that is one step. There needs to be a politics of limits, so to speak, actual limits. And it's also about a politics of less, and what less stuff, less clutter in our minds, but also in terms of consumption and in terms of things, that unnecessary things really, and less market. How our economies and societies today are very kind of everything we do almost is within the market, or there are few places in the society, at least if you live in the city, that are market free, where you don't expect to be consuming in one way or another. So freeing spaces for other ways of or being outside the market is a very important element in such a politics also. And also, which in the same, it's connected, is politics that provide opportunities for living slower and closer, or bringing societies closer together, local economies, shortening the distances we travel, for example, shortening the time we travel, and promote train travels instead of long distance flights is one thing. And then one very central aspect is that if a politics is supposed to, in order to be accepted, really, it needs to be a politics that keeps well-being at the center, and to create acceptance and also to change the norms, really. And politics that does that, I think, can also be in a way setting an example in the way that you were talking about, envisioning a different society and a different economics. So I think well-being is a central part in all the nitty-gritty that you talked about too.
Do you have any comments on that, Rebecka? I think we were going to let you, if you can prepare your questions now, start raising your hands, but we'll let you speak a little bit first.
Great. And thank you also, Dirk, for mentioning the rebound effect, because as a biologist and focusing a lot of on biodiversity, that's always the case when talking about, okay, but how much can we produce per hectare of this crop or whatever? And if that is a high number, a satisfying number, it's very hard to argue for this less productive ways to use the land, so to speak, like the debate between commercial and ecological organic farming, for example. And what we are dealing with is just this, like what will happen is the commercial and poisonous agriculture will grow on behalf of the biodiversity-rich areas. And this is very problematic. This is exactly Devon's paradox or the rebound effect. And what is sad and problematic about this is very hard to reverse that. Once we have created a very biodiversity, how do you say, like, it's a low biodiversity there after producing these monocultures and poisoning this land. It's very hard. It will take a lot of effort and time and money to try to make it biodiversity rich again. So when talking about biodiversity, it's the direct enemy of capitalism, I would say, and combined with the demand of growth. And also to reflect on what you said was about the well-being being in center. I work in the EU Affair Committee, where all the Swedish ministers will come to these meetings and have to discuss their position before going to Brussels. And we had this stand, or the Swedish government had this stand in a strategic paper or something like that. And I mentioned, kind of just summarized what we said here in this panel discussion about what about setting the well-being in center of the EU, because EU could maybe be in the forerunner and showing with good examples of win-win-win situations. And the Prime Minister said, like, that's nice philosophy. Let's keep that in mind. But what we need to do is focus on growth and competitiveness. So we really try, but I think the well-being must be also in center, because this is a vision where we need to be many people longing for something better. And for example, this mobility, which you mentioned, Dirk, it's not maybe about having a car, each and one of us, but to have an ability to go somewhere where we like to go with public transportation, for example. And as a consumer, which we are not all the time, maybe we could shift that into lesser and shorter working hours and have more time for what we think is important, what we think is nice, funny, what we have as a hobby or reading or doing more that makes us happy. So I think those kind of suggestions should be in the center, and maybe we can lure the majority of the people into the degrowth or post-growth policies. It's a little bit joke, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now it's time for questions. Do we also have online questions? Not yet, but there will be, I guess, and you will help me to catch them up. So I see one hand there, and I see quite many hands. I'm very glad for that. But just remember that you are 60 people or something here, and so don't make too long questions. Yeah, and please stand up and use the mic.
Hello, hello. Yeah, my name is Hannes. Thank you for a nice conversation and presentations. I thought of two things. You talked about limits, like it's something new that we're proposing. But I think many people are experiencing limits on their everyday lives, like hard to find somewhere to live, food prices, and austerity in the public sector and anything. So maybe you can talk about that this is maybe the opposite that we want to do. We want to and I'm glad you mentioned commons. That's about creating abundancy, right? So more things that are for free and that are governed together. And also I thought about when you said there's a difference between efficiency and sufficiency. Maybe on a macro level, it's not, because if you're sharing stuff together, then it's efficient, right? So maybe say there is no difference, really. And then it's a question, and that was about how can we, because all the time there will be traditional economists that will say, okay, sounds nice, but it's not possible. The financial system would crash or something like that. So how can we reverse this monopoly of opinions that it's only economists that are experts and take it back to the ground so we can all take part of these discussions and dare to do that? How would you do that, do you think?
Okay, maybe we can reflect on the first question, and then we can see. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for the suggestion. It's indeed, if you look at a more meso of macro level, sometimes the most efficient way is doing it in a sufficient way. So I'm thinking about people living in a building, sharing washing machines and stuff like that. So that I think that's really a very good remark. Thank you. The other thing is that about how to build this other narrative. I think it's already happening. I think in many countries, Belgium for sure, but I think also Sweden, we have alternative ways of where citizens organize to have energy co-ops. We have people working together with farmers to have community-supported agriculture. We have people working together to have co-housing. And so we have, I would say, the prototypes of the other economy. But most of these people are very busy doing it because it's difficult in a hostile environment. So we should, and it can be done on a city level, for instance, bring all these people together and telling the story of all these things already happening. We can call these initiatives prefigurative. They already figure out how the economy could look within 10 years. And so building on these existing practices and showing them and telling this is a future, this is what we want to support, I think is a very convincing way, convincing more than just figures and tables. So that would be my short answer.
I don't know if you want to add something to this question, or we can perhaps let a few more. Maybe we take 2 or 3 questions so that I think we'll have some time still. But
yeah, okay. Pernilla. So I just wanted to sort of continue on this on limits, and now I'm playing devil's advocate a bit here because I myself talk a lot about planetary boundaries and boundaries, but there has been discussions, for example, in Spanish researcher Georgios Callis, who talks about limits in his book with that name as well. And he talks about this, that there's a difference between this sort of idea of scarcity or austerity measures, and that perhaps we're egging this on by talking about scarcity of resources and so on, as that not being a powerful way to motivate people. Rather, he talks about like the power of self-limitation, really as this type of freedom. So I think it would be interesting to hear you talk a bit about that. Sort of this, there is this counter thing about limits could be seen as a way of sort of structuring on people as sort of needing limits, being limited by someone else, versus the actual quite liberal idea of self-limitation, which is sort of based on this idea that you're a thinking, capable human being. Something on this would be interesting.
And you please pass on to a few more. Ja, gärna stå upp.
Sorry, Per, just for you, Dirk. Do you say electricity in Holland or do you say power? Because power is a question of power. The energy cooperatives, that's power, people power. So power is a question of power. My question is to the audience. Tonight we invented the word omväxt, didn't we? So I will ask all of you, can we just agree that we start using that word? Because degrowth, you're a communist if you say degrowth, and I think so too. I don't like the word degrowth, because degrowth is that we are now all oilaholics. We are stuck in the oil economy. So if we go down and stay here, we're fucked. So omväxt is growth. So we're just rerouting. We're doing what you did in Ghent. You were developing your city into something better. That's omväxt. Degrowth is like, I don't like it. I'm stuck here. So can we decide we start using omväxt because it's more positive? Yes, for sure. I hope.
Okay, we take one more. Before you ask your question, I'd just like to say to the people online that you can mail your questions to the email address questions@cogito.nu. Cogito with a C, cogito.nu. Please do so.
Thank you. My name is Maria, and also building on Pernilla's and yours, and like sorry, an invitation and a challenge to us all. I am wondering if we are trying to use the logic of the old paradigm. The logic of the old paradigm, which you also mentioned in the beginning, the paradigm of dominance, of controlling nature, of transactions and not relationships. In contrast to compassion, caring, collaboration, being part of a whole and not being in separation. That paradigm, because you're talking a lot about controlling, and society is a social construction, right? So we made this up and we built it. You use a metaphor often for societies, it's the iceberg, and in the very bottom of these icebergs, you have values, assumptions, and worldviews. And built on that, you organize society. We have our institutions, and at the surface, you have our behaviors, technologies. And what if we would build societies on a different paradigm, on different values and worldviews? And can we really come to this change without revealing that bottom, the root causes that are causing these effects? And do we then really need to control? Are we raising our children to become grown adults that we need to control? Or are we trying to guide them and nurture them to become, adults taking responsibility and making wise decisions? And in that paradigm, do we need to talk about control in that way, or do we use our judgment and so on? So is there... Yeah, just something to think about. Thank you.
Okay, let's have a round of answers, and then...
I would just like to add something, sorry.
Okay,
what you just said, just a bit of inspiration. on SVT, the Swedish television, there are now 2 documentaries about the intelligence of plants. Because basically the value problem that we have is that we are smarter than nature and we have the right to dominate the earth and do whatever we want. And we invented one word, nature, to just sum it all up and call it dead. But it's in fact very intelligent. And I personally have a belief that maybe trees are much more intelligent than we, you know. We just made up saying we're more intelligent, but they can survive without, in almost any circumstance, while we are very, very delicate and we need specific surroundings to survive. So I would just like to recommend these documentaries. It's about smarta växter on SVT. So just thank you all for a good talk here.
Thank you.
Can I say something about this limits? I think to me limiting does not it's not about control. Limiting in this sense is really about living according to the physical realities, basically. But it's also, and I would think regarding what you said, I think we tend to forget about that limits can also be liberating, in the sense that they force us to think in new ways. They force us to imagine. If we have limitations, we are forced to use our creativity. And I think we are in desperate need of our creativity now. We are in desperate need of developing our imagination. So I think to find new ways in this. And certainly the transformation that is needed needs to be based on completely different values than our system is today, such as care, such as non-anthropocentric values, like the humans not being at the center of the economy, nor the society, nor our worldview. So I think those are thank you for raising those issues.
Yes, and thank you for raising these topics and these questions and this documentary. I will watch it. And I just agree so much about what you're saying, because the paradigm that we are currently in, which is setting the norms and creating the laws and everything and the economy, it's built upon this idea that we are the living intelligent life, and then we have other kinds of life that we kind of ranked in a very strange way. And I don't agree with this kind of ranking or the power bound to it. So I am a promoter of rights of nature, and I'm trying to also work with this in the parliament. It's a little bit like this taboo level of omväxt, which we agreed on. But I think it's crucial, because I think that's why we're also using nature as dead objects. Like we are using the nature as bricks in order to build our society. So this dominance, this world dominance that we are kind of playing, it's not right in morally or ethically or even scientific, or it's not even sustainable in the long run. So I think we need to do this shift, a paradigm shift of how we're viewing our fellow species and other non-human lives. And I think we can build upon that, because then there will be more, I think, built more on empathy, and also for a much longer perspective. Thank you.
I would like to add something on self-limitation. You cannot go on a diet in a candy shop. You cannot go on a diet in a candy shop. You cannot say to people, you have to self-limit yourself, but you have to live in a shopping mall. doesn't work. Limitation is a political concept, and self-limitation is also a political concept. 30 years ago, when I would have been here, I would not seen the people in the back because it would be blue smoke, everybody smoking. And so we realized that being free ourselves of toxic smoke, that's self-limitation for more freedom. If we, in my city, made the center car free, it's collective self-limitation for more freedom. So that's, I think, is the way to define and talk about self-limitation. It are ways to decide collectively to have more freedom. And that's the way I think we should discuss it. To go again back to the example of the candy shop. In Belgium, more and more candy shops and junk food are established around schools. And research has shown that the more of these junk food shops there are, the more young people eat it. So what we're going to do, say to these kids, behave well, limit yourself, or let's get rid of these junk food shops. That's the political question.
Yeah. Do we have the microphone somewhere? Or maybe I can read it, so you can keep it. Okay. No, you cannot, because it's time for a question here. Yeah, you are welcome. What would be the first step or action or decision or regulation Europe has to make to get towards the degrowth, I don't know, maybe omväxt, in practice? Is it useful to work on it as a country, or is it only useful as Europe or even on a larger scale? So I guess that's kind of the question, if it's possible for a small country or a small part of the country to do this, or do we have to go up on a higher level? What do you think?
I think both of the levels are important. The EU can, of course, do many things, but also I think in this sense, a lot of the value would be in communicating the future and the path to the future. What kind of visions that the EU is signalizing is also important. But then, as a nation, you don't have to wait. You can switch focus from this growth economy. And in Sweden, for example, the government is governing all the agencies through these letters. And in their letters, they put this requirement for the agencies to work for growth. So almost all the agencies we have in Sweden has this as a political goal that comes from the government. So one easy step would be to write something else. Let's replace that with well-being or something like that.
Any other comment, or maybe we can?
Maybe
we can have some more questions, perhaps. Or do you want to comment on the?
Maybe I want to use this question to be provocative.
That sounds very good.
We really should hijack the rhetoric of the right-wing politicians. So they are all talking now about security, because we have to build up a strong nation to be able to defend ourselves, maybe to the Russians, and so we have to invest a lot of money in arms. But at the same time, our economy is addicted to fossil fuels. Where do they come from? Our economy is addicted to raw materials. We don't have them. So every year, the European Union is spending, so we are spending 400 billion euros for buying fossil fuels. So talking about freedom and security, the sooner we have an economy running on renewables, the stronger and more secure we are. that's security we need. And so also in other parts of our society, the more we are focusing on reducing our demand, the stronger we are. If we can do with less metals, if we can do with less plastics, we are stronger as a nation and we are more secure in a very volatile geopolitical situation. So that's something also for me part of the green narrative.
Can I just add there, and perhaps going back to your question about austerity, because I think this is a crucial point. What do we talk about when we talk about security? What will we talk about when we talk about freedom? How do we talk about these concepts? Just like growth. What do they mean? What meanings do we put into them? And I think that is one important step, which is not talking about the EU or national level here, but rather the very individual level here, just like you were saying about using the word omväxt, how we talk about things matter. And I think that the austerity situation that many people experience now, with the rising prices, with the very competitive housing markets and so on, is one way that will also kind of build momentum around these questions, to kind of show the cracks in the system as it is. And I think freedom is also, and security is also very much connected to the biodiversity issue and the agriculture. How do we feed ourselves in our society? Do we do it on monoculture and imported konstgödsel? Fertilizers, thank you, from Russia, or do we have a working regenerative agriculture that is close by, that we can work in, that serves the community? I think that is also, when we talk about security, what kind of security do we mean, and what kind of security do we want? So, yeah.
Okay, I think we will going to let some more questions. Did you still have the mic over there? And please raise some more hands. Oh, but you had something.
Sorry for interrupting before. Just, I have a word in Swedish. My name is Ruth Alice. I'm a stage poet, and I have invented a word, underhållbarhet. Det är underhållande, vi tar hand om det, vi har kul, det är hållbart, och då är det faktiskt underbart. Så det ordet vill jag dela med mig av er till idag. So, a word in Swedish, it's untranslatable. You put sustainability, maintainability and entertainment together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very clever.
So, underhållbarhet.
So, who else was, yeah?
Yeah, thanks for the presentations. I'm Antoine. I come from France, and I'm going to teach you a word as well. In France, I think maybe some people here know it. It's PFH, 3 letters, which means putain de facteur humain. Sorry, it means the fucking human factor. And it's because it's a pun. It's just because we usually forget the human aspect in policy and in all the statements that we make. And I was curious today. What do you think is the psychology aspect to all that? Do you work with psychology scientists? And to the question, how much is enough? I wanted to answer a little more, because it's usually not an absolute measurement, but more like a relative measurement. We want more than what we used to have, more than the neighbor. I don't want an SUV because it's an SUV. I want an SUV because it's bigger than the neighbor's car. And in that context, how does sufficiency work? If you have any insights from psychology science on that.
Any more questions? Do we have one here? Yeah.
super interesting question, and maybe this is a totally different question. I don't know if you can combine them. My name is Martin. Thank you for the seminar. I was so intrigued by the story about LA in the beginning of the talk, and about what happened there was more strange, or more, it was hard to believe because it was so bizarre. Thank you. And then I saw like the best TV, the day afterwards, I saw the best TV show on national TV in Sweden. It's called Lilla Aktuellt. It's a news program for kids, and they always have something called fake. It's really nice because there was the sign, the Hollywood sign was burning, and the question was it fake or not? And that was fake. That was generated by artificial intelligence. So, yeah, and then we have Trump, and then we have the question: do you believe in climate change? You know. So I was thinking about the topic of truth. That we have to, it's not only to battle climate change, it's to battle the concept of truth. What's truth and science and so on. And I don't know if you can elaborate on that. It's a sort of abstract question. I hope you understand. How do we keep on fighting when the truth is challenged?
One more question, yeah.
Hi. So you talk a lot about sort of shortened work weeks, etc. And I wonder how you factor in sort of the global economy and sort of the growth orientation in a globalized economy, and sort of how that transitioning to a sufficiency model in this part of the world will impact a revenue of this country and of us being able to meet our basic needs, and how we are able to do that in a globalized context, I guess, in a relatively accessible manner.
Thank you. So we have 3 questions and a suggestion. I don't. So it's about psychology, it's about truth, and it's about the global economy. So maybe you can comment on the ones you feel comfortable with.
Okay, I can start with the first one then on the psychology of sufficiency. I have interviewed many individuals who try to reduce their consumption, and very much I would say about the core of the psychology of this individual sufficiency, if you want to call it that, has to do with contentment, and to redefine what it means for oneself to feel content, or what is it that make you content, or what is it that and very often after a period of kind of getting used to a lower consumption, people start questioning what is it that I really need. Well, it's not the things that I used to buy on impulse, and then the bigger question becomes then, what is it that makes me happy and content in my life? So that I mean that's a very basic psychology of sufficiency, but I think part of the answer lies in that, and again how we discuss this, how we discuss consumption, and what do we. I mean, we all have needs, but how we can work to satisfy those needs in different ways, and if we do it in non-materialistic ways, that's a start. That was one question.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. And about the truth, we see now we have Donald Trump and Elon Musk is owning X, and I don't know if I have so much as an answer, but I really share the concern, because what we're seeing is this incredible wealth is concentrated with, and also linked with all this concentration of power, and the power to kind of change people's narrative and view of what is a myth and what is a fact and what is accepted. And I think it's important to at least address this issue that wealth equals to power, and it could also equals to a lot of power about the conversations, because our conversations takes place online, and you can buy and own platforms, and you can design them, and you can kind of you can down prioritize what is truth and what is okay and what is not. And I think I've been working as a volunteer a lot from the environmental movement, and what we always said as a strength that we have compared to the super rich companies and with all their lobbyists is that at least we know what we're doing and what we're saying and sharing is the truth. And talking with individuals, meeting people in person, the truth is something that, at least from my point of view, is still valued when we meet and talk together as individuals and as persons to persons. But on this internet, which is now kind of toxic places as X, I think people must know and be aware that if you go out there, you can find drama and maybe entertainment, but not so much facts. And I think this is something that we have to be more aware about, that the money concentration and the power concentration, but also the power of the communication. So not so much of an answer, but thank you for the question. It's really important. It's not easy also for, as a politician, when you have something that is also maybe not popular to say, and the truth can be twisted, and myths and things can go viral, which is not true, and twisted into a really nasty debate that can scare people off from even participating online and sharing their point of views and what they think is this or that, or their opinions. So it's a change and something we should be aware of. Sorry, I don't have an answer.
So Dirk, the last question on the global thing was left for you, and I think you might want to comment on the other ones as well.
Yes, maybe for the last question, the global economy. Our current economy is an extractive economy. There are people living very poor conditions, mostly in the global south, because of our way of living. There are people working day and night so we can go to the Primark to buy a t-shirt of €2. There are people picking strawberries in Spain so we can buy them here for €1. So a planned transition of our economy is also opening the window that these people in their countries can build sustainable economies focused on the well-being of the people living there. So I think it's a huge chance of making a lot of places better, not only here. And on the first question, I think there are two elements. You gave the example of SUVs. People don't want SUVs. Otherwise, we have cars for at least 50 or 60 years. 10 years ago, SUV was an exception. So it was not that 20 years ago everyone wanted the SUV because the neighbor has a huge SUV. It was the car industry in Europe spends more than €1 billion every year on advertisements. Imagine that you as a green movement would have €1 billion for advertisements a year. Could make a change. So the impact on what we want, our longings, due to the advertisements, it's 24-hour machine, it's incredible. And therefore I really like what you said, we need what I call profit-free zones in our communities. Places where we can hang together, have a coffee, but there are no advertisements. There's no need to consume more. I think this is critical. And on a second level, to get rid out of this rat race of consumption, we cannot reconnection with each other, reconnection with nature. And I think there, in a very respectful way, we can learn a lot from other cultures. I think there we really to give one example, a book I really can recommend is Breeding Sweetgrass. It's from an American professor who's combining scientific knowledge with indigenous knowledge. And so, for instance, she tells a story, if they go out in a forest looking for herbs, the first plant they find of the herb they want, they will always not take it, but they can, because it could be the last one. So I think this kind of reasoning we should reinstall in our culture.
Okay. Yeah?
From Maria Mahila Moneypenny wants to suggest regrowth as an English translation of omväxt. Then Mats Hellander, the chairman of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance in Sweden, would like to know more from Rebecka about the new narrative that you touched. He says, I think it's very important to have a changed narrative. What would be the most important components of such a narrative?
Okay. I also want to send an invitation so we can also have a longer meeting for these discussions. But I think what I was talking about was the paradigm shift. I hope that's what he's referring to. And I try to base this on, I come as a biologist into the political field, and I don't think that we build this economy, the capitalistic growth demanding economy, on all these other life forms with respect for them. So I think the narrative needs to change from being this really kind of dominant and egoistic player, and kind of giving something back. And we also know from science that if we have one person that is being helped and the other one that is helping, the one that is being helped is very happy and satisfied, but the one that is helping out is really even more happier. So I think that we can do something here to give more than we take. We give more back to nature and invite us all to be part of this, and not just have this bad conscience about, oh, should I consume this or that? Do I have to choose between so many different kinds of objects in the store, and what is the least damage, into something else? Where could I contribute more? What does this company do to restore and rewild the world, to build an economy that is rewilding the world with every single money spent, for example? That's really radical idea, but I think people are longing into some direction of this. And I think that the narrative could change in many different kind of layers. And when I, for example, talked about limits before, a while ago, I was thinking, for example, ecocide law, which is the international way of making big scale environmental damages criminalized. And these processes is actually moving forward. And when that takes place, that will also change the narrative of what is normal and what is criminal. So many things in this, and many layers, and abstract layers as well. So I hereby send an invitation for a longer meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, because we're not really finished, but we're closing in on the final. I think we talked a lot about narratives, and we want to have new discussions and thinking differently about the economy and so on, and introducing the sufficiency thinking. So I think it's on one level. I think we have said quite a lot. Apart from this more visionary, do you have where to start, except from this visionary thing? Do you have any good advice that we can start working on when we go home? Things we can do to more introduce these concepts to the rest of the world, to our neighbors, maybe.
I think of sufficiency as in a bit the same way as with feminism. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses, really, and to see to see sustainability issues and questions of justice and well-being in a new light. And for me, at least, it's been like, once I put them on, I can't really take them off again. So that is one thing. Put them on and don't take them off, and talk with people about the new things that they make you see. And I also want to mention another dimension of the psychology of sufficiency, which is norms, really, the norms of society, and the norms that we shape together, that we can really where we can really make a difference in what we do and what we show that we do, and how we talk about that. So and also something that I think is hopeful, and that you also bring up in your book, I think this citizen assemblies is one place to start in cities and in communities and in on a country level. I think those spaces of talking about these issues and listening and deliberating together about how to what kind of activities should we allow and what can be enough in our society. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think you will have the last word, so then we can...
Something to bring home.
Yes,
well, share this knowledge and books and scientific papers, and please put pressure on politicians. They need it, we need it, and they need to know if there is a demand, if there is, that will make it more likable to go forward in these topics. And I think so much has been said during this time, so just enjoy the spring and enjoy the sounds of all the birds that are coming back to these areas of yours, and get to know them a little bit, and get to know other species as well, and learn from them, and respect them, and talk about that as well, together with this new economy, this omväxt, these visions that we have. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you. And I think you will read something we will end with that. So I will say thank you before that, so that we will really end with it. So thanks, Åsa, and thanks, Rebecka, and thank you, Dirk, and thank you to the audience. Thank you to the man who ruled the audio system and all the technologies, and to Cogito, and to the financiers and everyone else.
So at the end of the book, we use again our imagination, and we describe how a young couple within 10 years can live a very good and sufficient life. So I'm going to read a little part. So it's about two people, Noah and Victoria. It feels like ages since they both worked 5 days a week, not counting the overtime, spent a lot of money on rent, needed their own car to go to work, and possessed products that never lasted very long. In meantime, European Parliament has introduced a 4-day working week. But like many of their friends, Noah and Victoria have chosen to work a little bit less than that. So Noah works Monday to Wednesday, and Victoria Tuesday. They also help out at the local parent cooperative 1 day a week. It's brought them into contact with lots of new people and gives them cheap childcare for their 2 children. Friday is a special day, volunteer day, of course, on a voluntary basis. Noah rolls up their sleeves at the collective farm, half an hour away by electric bike. The agro-ecological farm focuses on growing locally on healthy soil, a good life for its animals, and more biodiversity in and around the fields. Their weekly visit at the farm also means that Noah sees their parents at least once a week, as part of the co-op, has been converted into a co-housing project for young and old. Now that a fast train connects the city with the surrounding villages, the farm is easily accessible. To be honest, these changes were quite nerve-wracking. What would it be to work less and therefore earn less? And who knows, be complicit in your own uncertain future. Victoria especially found this difficult. But now they both know that their lives are richer. In fact, they have more freedom and security. One crucial change came 4 years ago, when they moved into a wonderful and affordable house in an old factory, which was renovated by a housing cooperative. Now they have a secure tenancy for life at a rent which is well below market rate. Of course, Noah and Victoria's lives aren't completely carefree. The greenhouse gas emissions of recent decades will continue to destabilize the climate for years to come. Damaged ecosystems are recovering slowly. Not everybody they know has an affordable home. And while there's more global solidarity now than there was 10 years ago, for many people in regions with the highest temperature, life is very tough indeed. They hear the stories firsthand from climate refugees. Nobody can predict the future. Even the slow society in which Noah and Victoria are raising their children is still trying to work out how to respond to the words of Anat Singh. The art of living on a damaged planet and how to restore it. Thank you.